everybody, and welcome to the Feminine Principle Podcast, Astrology for Authentic Living. My name is Mel with Energetic Principles.
And I'm Shawna with Neo Feminine Astrology.
And in this episode, we will be discussing the astrology for the week of September 4th, and what we have titled, Living in the Dream. The purpose of this podcast is to give inspiration and guidance for this week with real-life examples of what to expect.
The three major aspects that we'll talk about today are the Sun in Virgo opposite Neptune and trine Pluto, which we're calling cycles of knowing the self. We'll also talk about Mercury stationing direct and forward into Virgo, which we're calling back on track. And lastly, we'll talk about the full moon in Pisces, which is about spiritual connection in a material world. So as always, please remember that some of these aspects will influence you more than others based on what's literally happening in your life right now and your personal birth chart. So if it's not in your birth chart, if you don't have this tendency, it's probably not going to happen. But we always encourage you to notice what you connect with most, what resonates most, and always use your intuition and logic to decide what's best for you.
Yes, because you know you best. So yeah, Shawna, let's kick off this week's episode with a quick rundown of the moon's path through the zodiac and some other minor aspects for all you astro geeks out there. So we're actually going to kick off the week in America with the tail end of Aquarius on our Labor Day holiday before the moon moves into compassionate Pisces in the evening. And then our lunar lady is going to continue her waxing phase until she reaches the full moon in Pisces on Wednesday, which Shawna just spoke about, and we are going to go into much more detail later into this episode. She then carries on, now in her waning cycle, into the fiery realm of Aries on Thursday, and then closes out the week with her move into grounded Taurus on Saturday. Also of note, we have Mars, who's going to be moving in to Virgo from his Leo stay. Will be moving to Virgo on Tuesday, September 5th at 2:35 a.m. Pacific Time, 9:35 a.m. Universal Time, and 7:35 p.m. Aussie Eastern Time. And we'll talk about this a bit more along with the other transits as we focus on this week. So yeah, Shawna, let's get started.
Yeah. So we're excited to jump into these transits. One last note before we do, if you enjoy listening to the podcast, please share us with friends or consider becoming a patron to show your appreciation. You can find out more about that at feminineprinciplepodcast.podbean.com. And as always, we love hearing from you and appreciate all the love.
Yes, please reach out. We want to hear from you. So that being said, let's start this week with a nice little hefty number we got going on. And that's the Sun in Virgo, who is saddling up to the opposition to Neptune in Pisces and trining Pluto in Capricorn. In what we are titling Cycles of Knowing the Self. And so that Sun is going to be opposite Neptune exactly on Monday, September 4th at 10:28 p.m. Pacific Time, which is Tuesday, September 5th at 5:28 a.m. Universal Time and 3:28 p.m. Aussie Eastern Time. And that opposition is going to happen at 12 degrees Virgo and Pisces. And then we're going to have Sun trining Pluto and Capricorn later on in the week on Saturday, September 9th at 3:41 a.m. Pacific Time, which is 10:41 a.m. Universal Time and 8:41 p.m. Aussie Eastern Time. And that trine will happen at 16 degrees Virgo and Capricorn. So Shawna, kick us in with your quote for this combo transit.
So this quote is by the psychotherapist and spiritual counselor Matt LaFara. He says, falling apart, holding it all together, then falling apart, then holding it all together again. Cycles of integration and disintegration, chaos and ground, stillness and activity, sanity and confusion, hopelessness and hope. As flows the natural world, the unfolding of the heart is alive and of the unknown. And so I picked this quote in particular for this transit because it may have this feeling of falling apart and then being able to hold it together, or trying to hold it together and then falling apart again. The sun is about the ego. It's about the spirit. It's also about what it is that we are here to do, what we are here to bring, to share to the world. And there's typically a necessary element of ego or personality associated with that. When we have Neptune and Pluto come in, there's this quality of restructuring the ego in some way. And I find that his quote really illustrates this process of restructuring the ego very eloquently, because it can feel like chaos and like things are falling apart or even hopeless at times. But it's never something that's permanent. It's always something that is just being shifted, and that can feel quite intense, because the ego is how we present ourselves in the world. It's our identification. And so all of these things may have a possibility to come up either in a subtle or a more overt kind of way this week. And so I'm really excited to talk about this transit, and especially during the week when we have a full moon, like we're going to talk about in a moment. How do you see this playing out, Mel?
Well, I love the title that we have for this, The Cycles of Knowing the Self, because I think that is so on point, when the sun meets these outer planets, and they're, it brings us to, of awareness on not only a personal level, but a societal level, and, just everything that's going around us. And especially with that full moon, Shawna, like things are brewing right now. We have oppositions brewing. And that Neptune, is not only a player in, this opposition, but is also very much tied into that full moon as well. So, this whole week is kind of wrapped up around, these Neptunian, ideas, and, the ego and the self and the identity being, confronted with, in a sense, to our dreams and our ideals and our illusions in life. And, what is real and what is this fantasy? And so we're looking at it with the spotlight really shining on, the sun is providing the most light possible for that Neptune. So this is a week where we can really get clear on what it is, that we're spiritually feeling, what it is, that we are, the dreams that we have for ourselves. And it's also shining that light on, where we might be a little deceived or disillusioned with certain things. And we, have to kind of work through to get that clarity of Virgo, 'cause the sun is in Virgo, and, Virgo can pick that apart, and get the details needed out of that to bring a healthy dose of reality into the situation. And I think that is kind of the key thing here is bringing that reality into awareness. And especially with that Pluto trine later in the week, that here we can flow with that honesty, and that breaking down, and getting real with these two earth signs, coming out of that watery realm that might not have as many boundaries. And we're talking about the moon too. And that's why I love your quote, Shawna. That quote was so, not even just for this transit, but that quote just in general, like
for life,
that could be for life, for astrology, and for like just the cycles of knowing the self. Essentially, I think that quote really summed it up. So thank you for sharing that. So, how do you see all this? I feel a lot of, we're going to shine some light on, some illusion in our lives, essentially. But for the good, we got to bring that to awareness. So how do you feel that kind of plays in?
Yeah. So I like what you say, Mel, about needing to lean into the Virgo practicality and the Virgo qualities of discernment. Because when the sun opposes Neptune, things can feel super confusing. It can feel like everything's up in the air or ambiguous, or even like things are dissolving. That's also a Neptune kind of quality. We can be predisposed to getting stuck in an illusion or a fantasy. And so, the fact that the sun is opposite Neptune, it shows me that there is this quality of trying to lean into compassion and spirituality, but then also to keep our feet on the ground at the same time and to not get carried away with that. And to be frank, you may not be able to completely keep your feet on the ground. So this week is not a time to make major life altering decisions. It's a good time to be like, okay, I know that things feel confusing, and I'm going to do what I need to do to give myself a sense of safety during that process. The other part that's really interesting is, so we have Sun in Virgo, which is about discernment, practicality, etc. It's an earth sign. The trine to Pluto later in the week, to me, that really says that earlier in the week, okay, we have Neptune, we're confused. There's like this sense of something falling away or dissolving. And then later in the week, there's a call to be really honest. And there's a call to be not honest in telling the truth to other people, but more so honest with ourselves and what isn't working or what is working, and to really be comfortable with opening up to shadow material or to unconscious material. I think that that's stuff that will come up this week as well, especially later in the week.
Yeah, especially with that full moon that we will be talking about. And so just a couple little things to kind of put you you astro geeks into some perspective as far as other planets are concerned. I find it very interesting, Shawna, that the moon moves into Pisces 0 degrees 0 minutes at the very minute that we make the opposition to Neptune. It's like 0, 0, 0, 0. I'm like, well, okay, well, all right. And then we have Mars, who's at the tested degree of 29 degrees of Leo. And so our actions are, and our own ability to keep in mind all that self-love work we've been doing and acting on, this season is going to kind of have a test there. And then I also find it very interesting that Venus, who's now in Leo, is in conjunct to this Neptune. So there's an adjustment there, there's, love lives can feel a little unsettled right now. Finances, being able to relate to others and getting that clear picture of, just relating in general and, our own value and worth. And so there's an adjustment that needs to be made, around there. And Venus is really calling, in Leo to continue this, self-love and this care, and finding our joy and all this stuff that we've been working on for, several weeks now. We now have, Venus, who is kind of wrapping that up and is giving a little bit of an uncomfortable, contact with that Neptune. And so I feel that there's a little bit of a challenge there to kind of get our minds wrapped around once again this like hairy gray area, So these are all things to keep in mind during these transits. So I don't, how do you feel that Venus might play in, or the fact that we're about to move into things. Mars is about to move into Virgo. Like, I feel like things are there's some shifting this week, especially we're about to talk about Mercury. We got Mars moving into Virgo, all that. So how do you think that plays in, Shawna?
Yeah, well, to me, so the fact that we have this cluster of planets still in Leo, and I with Mars and Leo just about to transition, we still have, when this aspect is exact, we have Mercury turning forward out of retrograde, which we will talk about, but it's actually at the 28 degrees of Leo, which is the eclipse point, and then Venus will move over that point as well in the coming weeks. But this cluster of Leo energy tells me that there's still, like, this transit is related to whatever it is that came up during the solar eclipse in Leo, in August. And so, I think that may add to the element of working things out, in an egoic kind of way, like, and not necessarily in an ego, like, oh, you have a big ego, but like ego, like, who am I? What do I want? How do I define myself? Which are important things to like function in the world. And, so it may, like, even though we're kind of like wrapping up the eclipse season, it may actually feel more confusing than ever. And so what I want to encourage everyone is to know that even if things feel kind of like up in the air, or you're like, damn it, like I can't like figure out like my life stuff, and I still feel, you know, anxiety or confusion or whatever, or I don't know, maybe you feel good. But, if there is any sense of unrest, that is pretty typical for this period of time. And the more that we can be curious about it, the more pleasant that process will be. And so I would be watching throughout the week, but especially when the sun is opposite Neptune, when that's exact on Monday, Tuesday, like what is it that comes up? What are little intuitions or sparks of inspiration that come around, and maybe you can connect those back to the solar eclipse that happened in August.
Yeah, that's so interesting, Shawna, because we are still doing all this Leo work, and I find it interesting that we have this opposition essentially at the point where Mercury went retrograde in Virgo. So it's kind of activating where the whole Mercury cycle, retrograde cycle began, and here we are with Mercury now about to station direct on that eclipse point. And of course this might be for the next segment, but it just did occur to me that, you know, we do have mutual reception going on with the sun and the and Mercury right now. So how our mind is, you know, formulating around, and processing all these things that are going on around us, especially this, you know, Neptune transit, where we're going to be pondering options. We're going to be pondering all that is around us. And it's not a time for, you know, making quick decisions or like moving fast. We're entertaining some things. And right now our vitality might be a little bit lower because, you know, when Neptune's involved, things get a little spacey. So just, use this time to kind of let go and maybe find some retreat if you need to. And just let go and trust your intuition at this time, because that's kind of the beauty of that Neptune and Pisces and being able to, use that opposition. Cause, you know, oppositions are about, you know, kind of meeting in the middle or cooperating with something, or it's two opposite energies that have to, kind of come together in a sense. And with that Virgo sun, we're looking for facts. We're looking for reality. We're looking for, you know, the cold, hard details. But Neptune is really saying, you know, hey, you might not know what's real right now, but you have to let go and trust your own intuition, because what you're inspired by right now, is essentially, kind of it's pointing you in a certain direction. So you don't have that, you know, hard evidence. And that's why a little faith, and that kind of Neptunian, function is, opposing that sun, you know? So.
Yeah, I agree. This is a time to trust oneself. It's not a time to look for other people to tell you what you should do. It's a time to notice what it is that you're drawn towards, and to notice what it is that's falling away, and to trust that process.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Because, keep in mind, right before we have this transit, right before it goes exact, basically, the moon, right before it moves into Pisces, will be at the tail end of Aquarius and is going to oppose, that tested Mars in Leo and Mercury. So chances are, you know, you might get a little confused, when confronted by someone else or society in a sense, because we have that Aquarius moon, like something outside of us is, you know, like some harsh words or a message that might not be received as well, you know, or like some type of action is like, you're like, what is going on here? I'm confused now. You know, so keep in mind, there could be something that kind of, gets triggered, especially on that Monday, that kind of puts us into this place of questioning and not really having a grip on what's real right now. And asking us to essentially focus on our dreams, because that's the beauty of this transit, I think, is that especially when we're pairing Pluto with it, which we're going to have the trine later in the week, like if we get an objective, you know, we're talking about opposition, objective viewpoint on our dreams and our visions and what we see for ourselves and our, we can pair that with what we're striving for and use that trine energy, to basically, let go of things in our life and renew certain areas so that we can make these things, real, once those two earth signs are activated. So I think we'll get a lot more clarity, especially with that poking of Pluto truth and honesty with ourselves later in the week. But we might start off, and through the week and through that Pisces full moon a little bit confused and just not quite knowing what the hell we're doing. So.
Yeah, I agree with that trajectory, Mel, where there's more confusion earlier in the week, and then later in the week, there's more of a possibility for strengthening with Pluto coming into the mix, and with the moon being in Taurus over the weekend too, which is strengthening, and like that combo to me talks more about self sustainability than anything. Like, yeah, like I'm cool. I got my shit together.
Yeah. Well, that makes so much sense, Shawna, because, once the moon moves, it's probably going to be on Sunday. It's going to form a grand trine in Earth, and we're going to feel incredibly grounded, between that moon, sun, Pluto combo. And I think we're going to feel way more in tune with, those honest introspections that we've gone through and what it is that we're creating on this material realm. So I guess the silver lining here is if you don't know what's going on in the beginning of the week, hold on. Don't make any rash decisions and just wait it out, because you're going to feel so much more grounded, by the weekend. We're just getting tested all the time. No. But such is life.
Yes.
And it's interesting because, I find, that when we're going to have that Pluto, trine on Saturday, we're going to have the moon, which will be in, Aries, in the late degrees of Aries at that point, and is going to be conjunct Uranus. So, I think that's our emotional selves and our behaviors, and we're going to get a dose of awareness in that zone. And we might feel a little restless about certain situations, and we're going to want to figure it out. And we're going to want to, especially in Aries, we're going to want to take action. Which I think is going to be okay by that time, because we're going to have Mercury going direct. And so I feel like this moon Uranus Aries combo right before we move into that grounded Taurus is going to give us kind of that spark and that like just oomph that we need to get us out of this and to move on and get ready for what's exciting and new and how we can take action on that. So, Shawna, how do you see this Aries and Uranus moon action kind of triggering this Pluto revolution?
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about this. I do feel like the moon coming into Aries after being in Pisces, to me at least, it's always kind of a breath of fresh air where things feel less complicated. I feel more energized. Aries is like a forward moving, energetic kind of sign, whereas Pisces is ambiguous and a little bit, like I'm swirling in the ocean. Where is this all going? Whereas Aries is like, I don't even need to know where I'm going. I'm just going. So I think it may feel refreshing, but I wonder if there is, I would, for myself, I would watch out for making rash decisions at the same time. So I don't know, but I like what you say, Mel, about how with the moon being with Uranus at that point, it may spark, some new insights, some new innovation. So I think the more that we've done the work earlier in the week to stay grounded, yes, to be with ourselves and to not get like lost in that Neptunian Pisces kind of ocean, I think the more prepared we are to move forward later in the week.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And, cause here we have that meeting of the moon, in Aries with Uranus, which is essentially trining that eclipse point, which we have Mercury on the tested 29 degree of Leo as well. So it's talking to that. So, I feel like our mind is going to be enlivened at this time. And I would, stress what Shawna just said about like making any rash decisions, because we're talking about two fire trining together. And Mercury's going direct, and we're going to have a better grip on, you know, what it is that we've been working on for these past how many weeks. And we might feel ready to go. Just don't, you know, just don't jump out the gate. Like, still take a little bit of, just take a second, because which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, that whole Mercury, you know, stationing direct and going forward. It's not like a bing, it's done. There's still a buffer there. So just keep that in mind. But I think overall, you know, these transits are essentially saying change is here. You know, our renewal is here. And we're working through confusion to really find the truth about where it is that we're going. And like we're talking about, knowing the cycles of the self. Because this doesn't happen one time and never happens again. These are things that, you know, every year we have a sun opposite Neptune transit, where we question these things that are coming up and, you know, question our spiritual direction, question how clearly we see things, question our, you know, own, question our own ability to get in touch with our intuition and trusting in the process of life. And in the next, you know, within the last several years and in the next several years, we still have Neptune, in Pisces, where it is in its dignity. So these years of questioning are strengthened that much more so because it's in this Virgo Pisces axis for several years. So yeah. So that being said, Shawna, let's talk about these tarot cards, because I think if there is like a little like let the glitter come out now, because so basically we have the Ace of Wands as the focus and the Judgment card as the grounding. And if you listen to last week's podcast, you know that Judgment had made its appearance there as well. So essentially I look at this as a spark of vitality for renewal. You know, we've got Pluto involved here, and, we're basically becoming more and more aware of what our truth is, and understanding the past and being able to, you know, work for the future on these new, principles that we've, basically come to, and this awakening that we've had. And that Ace of Wands is like, you know, the ultimate inspiration, the beginning of new growth. This is the time to really, you know, start into something, and embrace this burst that will be coming our way. So Shawna, how do you see these two cards, pairing together for this Neptune Pluto contact?
Yeah, so I was super excited when I saw these. It was like, oh, yay, these are fun, exciting, encouraging cards for, as you said, Mel, new growth. And these cards actually made me think of something that I saw yesterday. So I have an orchid plant in my living room. It's sitting on my desk. I'm looking at it right now. And my mom got it for me for my birthday in July. I don't know about you guys, but typically when I get an orchid plant, it looks beautiful, and then flowers fall off, and then it dies, and then I throw it away. But like my mom, she always gets me one, and she's gotten really good at getting them to regrow. And I guess they bloom, like once the flowers die, you let them die, but then, you know, it'll bloom the next year. And I was looking at it yesterday, and all of the flowers have fallen, and I was like, fuck, you know, it's dead or whatever. But then I was looking at one of the leaves, and there's this new growth on the leaf. So, and it's like actually really dramatic. Like, as I'm looking at it now, I think it's grown a lot. Like, the new leaf has actually grown more substantially now that the flowers are gone versus where it was before. And so I share this because I was like, yes, like death and decay does not mean that something is gone or dead forever. There can be new growth in different areas. And so that made me think of this transit with Neptune and Pluto, because it's like there's something here that is falling away but there's something else that's coming in. And to me, this is, like you were saying, Mel, we're always growing and being tested, and we're always going through cycles. And so these cards, to me, the Ace of Wands is like quintessential new growth, something new coming in, especially around passion and inspiration and bringing something new to the world. And then the Judgment to me is like, hey, like literally don't judge this, whatever it is that's coming in, because you don't know what it is yet. It could be anything. So that's what I think.
It could be. I love that, Shawna, and especially you pointing out that the rest had to die away. The rest had to be cut away, pruned away, in order for this new growth to have all the nutrients that is needed in order for it to create this newness and this freshness of the plant. And I think, and this is, I love the analogy just for Pluto in general. Just because that's what it is. It's like these things have to die away. You have to cut off the limbs that are sucking energy from something that is dead, like when we hold on to these things in our life, and we don't release them when is necessary, or we stay, in that Neptunian illusion that there's still something there. Essentially, we're sucking all the energy from the possibility of new growth. And so I think that these two cards together kind of represent like that Judgment, being, having a revelation about something and an awakening, and, finding peace with what was and letting that go. And then, throwing all that energy, into, the newness, or revitalizing something that was once was and kind of needs new growth in order to continue forward. That's the thing with Judgment card, is it's not always about, releasing fully and then embracing the new. A lot of times it's about, releasing aspects of the old and finding renewal within that new, just being more aware to it in a different way, and finding new insight and the realization of truth around certain things in our life that need to be renewed. So I think these are excellent cards, and they give us hope here, because at the end of the week, I think you're just going to find that you're inspired and you're more vital than ever. And you got through some time, and now you're ready to carry on, and you're that much more clearer because we've gotten through this Neptune transit. So that being said, let's talk about a couple questions to take away for this Sun opposition. And so some things I'd ask myself, I would say, are my dreams speaking to me? What are they saying? How do they help me know thyself? I would ask, where is my truth becoming clearer and clearer? What brings me vitality at this point in my life? And then lastly, I would ask, how can I take this renewal of inspiration to the next level? Where can I integrate that awareness in my everyday life? So, keep an eye on your dreams. Keep an eye on your dreams during this whole week, actually, because there might be some really key, material to work with, in that kind of subconscious realm. So, keep an eye open, keep an eye closed, I guess, for that.
Keep your brain open, your eyes closed.
So there you go. Oh, all right. So let's move on to our next topic of focus, and that is Mercury, who is finally stationing direct and going forward into Virgo, and what we are calling back on track. Thank God. So that Mercury is going to station direct on Tuesday, September 5th. Right, during all that Neptune action, Tuesday, September 5th at 4:30 a.m. Pacific time, which is 11:30 a.m. Universal time, and 9:30 p.m. Aussie Eastern time. And once again, that's going to be at the 28 degrees of Leo, which is our eclipse point. And then we're going to have Mercury is going to move into Virgo, shortly after on Saturday, September 9th at 7:52 p.m. Pacific time, which is Sunday, September 10th, 2:52 a.m. Universal time, and 12:52 p.m. Aussie Eastern time. So Shawna, kick us in with your quote for Mercury stationing direct.
So this quote, and even this title, I chose very specifically for Mercury retrograde, not like jumping forward or leaping forward. I chose the title Back on Track. So it's like, we're not like diving off the diving board. We're just like, oh, back on track. So this quote is by the Danish philosopher, and oh my gosh, guys, I am going to butcher this name.
Kierkegaard.
Yeah, thanks. Kierkegaard. Thanks, Mel, for saving me. I don't always look up the name pronunciation in the beginning. Okay, sorry, Mercury retrograde.
Hey, all my ninth house planets are here for you, girl.
Yeah,
my ninth house is here for you.
So he says, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. And so I like this for the entire process of Mercury retrograde, but especially the stationing direct point, because the thing is we don't always know what's happening as we're living it. So it's helpful to look back. It's helpful to reflect. And that's the retrograde part of the Mercury process. But at the same time, we do have this process of Mercury moving forward, and it kind of goes back and forth 3 or 4 times throughout the year where it will retrograde and then move forward and then retrograde and then forward. And because Mercury is related to the mind and the thought process, we're always doing this. We're always living forward, but then understanding backwards. And so this is a pivot point where, ideally, while Mercury has been retrograde, we've been understanding backwards. We've been retooling things and reflecting and going backwards in time in an intellectual way, in a cognitive way. And so now it's a pivot point where we're like, okay, I'm going to take these things that I now understand a little bit better and hopefully put them into practice going forward.
Yes. I love the quote, Shawna. I mean, it's so apropos for Mercury and its retrograde cycle and the fact that we're going direct, but just life in general, like just getting understanding that concept. Because we essentially are always seeing what was, and that taints our vision of what is and what will be. So I love that quote. And no wonder he is a philosopher, because that makes you think. So, I'm excited about Mercury going direct, because I feel like these last handful of weeks have been very fruitful. For me personally, obviously there hasn't been a lot of action on the outside world, but my inner self has, in the way I think, and I've been breaking down certain things in my life, I've been getting real, cause we had been retrograding back into Virgo, and now we're, at this point in Leo. And essentially, we've spent time getting real in our minds about what's going on here. And how we can, take our own reality and then move that back into, everything that, we want to express and share from our own selves and our own hearts, and be able to then take action on those things when Mercury is going to go back into Virgo. Because that's the thing, is like, I love how we're going to station on this eclipse point. We're going to activate that eclipse point and all that's happening in our lives, since then. And then we'll get to move back into Virgo, where Mercury is in its, dignity and exaltation. It's just strong there. And so we're going to be able to simplify things, in our process, and really start to break down all those things that we have, terms we have come to mentally, in our lives, with our thinking, our thoughts, how we communicate with others, and how focused our mind is, because Virgo is going to give us like an injection of focus, is going to simplify things, is going to help us get practical. And, I couldn't have asked for a better sign for Mercury to move into, going direct, because, all that work we've done since we've entered the shadow on July 24th, it went retrograde on August 12th. And now here it is going direct on September 5th. And during that whole time, we've been, really working on these functions, and now they get to be back on track, but in a supreme form and energy, to best utilize all that work we've done. So yeah, Shawna, how do you see like how important it is that it goes into Virgo so quickly, and how lucky we are, I think, to have that move?
Yeah. So I'm reminded of looking at Virgo in the reason why Mercury is considered exalted and why it's considered ruled by Virgo even is because Mercury plays really well in the sign of Virgo. The qualities of Mercury, the qualities of the mind and thought processes and communication, those things, those parts of us, they do very well when we're analytical, when we're discerning, when we have a critical eye and we can break things down. Like those are all Virgo kind of qualities. And so what I think is, I think you're right, Mel. There's a lot of benefit to going forward immediately, practically, into this very critical and discerning, and like there's a call for clarification of things. And so to me, it seems as though there's a lot of support for that. There's a lot of support for us to understand the Mercury retrograde process, the things that have happened over the past few weeks very quickly. Whereas if Mercury were moving direct in a different sign, let's say if it was moving direct in Pisces, we may be integrating in a slower, and we may be integrating more slowly.
Much more slowly.
Yeah, much more slowly. And we'd be like, but with Virgo, we're like, all right, like, yeah, what's happening? What we need to do? Let's make a list about it, pros and cons, and all of these Virgo kind of things. So I think those are even literal good activities to do, to make lists, and to create a structure. So maybe even that's something that a person wants to do in the middle of the week when Mercury actually stations direct. Like, okay, what have I learned? What kinds of things have come up? And it's going to be a little bit different for each person, depending on what you have been evaluating, and then also what's been going on, how Mercury has been activating your birth chart. For me, Mercury has going right over my ascendant and my Venus, and so lots of issues around my personality and how I relate to people, which is Venus, have come up. So I think that might even be a really nice thing to do, Tuesday when it goes direct, to contemplate what kinds of things have come up, and essentially, like, what are the lessons there? What is it that we want to do with that information?
Right, Shawna, because here we are talking about Mercury in Virgo, and Virgo is looking for some meaning, to grab a hold of around, what it is that we're thinking about and going for, and communicating our best selves. So I find it interesting that, we have all this kind of Neptune energy, and that, possible confusion and uncertainty, and where does that happen in the mind, So I find that move into Virgo, which happens to be on Saturday, is really lining up with all our kind of, Taurus, Earth trine, energy that's going to really ground this week, at the end of it. Excuse me. So keep in mind that is at play. And I think that the universe is on a perfect timeline. I mean, it always is, but especially in this sense. Just keep that in mind as we're working through this week. And especially since we're tapping into our dreams, we just spent all this time talking about, the sun, opposing Neptune, and getting clear around, certain issues in our life, but also, tapping into our own, creative faculties and our imagination and our intuition, and getting these kind of insights and this inspiration, and then being able to go forward in that with Mercury now in Virgo, and get that down on paper, put that action plan together to put those dreams into reality. Because that seems like a lot of what we've been doing now for a lot of people and for several weeks is, how do we bring our dreams into reality? Like, how do we make what it is that we want, what we see and what we vision for ourselves, real in this world? And I think Mercury going, forward into a Virgo cycle for, the next, 3 weeks or so, is really going to kind of whip our minds into shape, and get focused, have a plan, look at it from all sides, discern it, be real about it, and, get our minds on track, for our future, because essentially that's what, this solar eclipse has really been activating, and we're activating all these points right now between Uranus and Mars, and Mercury being there, and eventually Venus is going to get there. So, we're really working on, a lot of these solar eclipse issues, and how we can take certain things to a next level. But a lot of times that requires a focused mind that is back on track. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Mercury moving into Virgo is actually a really nice support for all of the Neptunian energy that we have going on. Something to grasp onto while we're floating through the ocean.
Yes, we need a solid, that, Mercury's kind of our life raft right now, or that the floating driftwood that comes by and you're like, oh, thank God, let me grab a hold of this. I'm gonna float here, and, I'll make it. But now I have that I have something that's real to grasp upon. So we can float within that Neptune, vibe. But keep in mind that we are still in that Mercury shadow until September 19th. So here we are back on track, but just know that that track is like, you ever start to, you get on a bike and you start to pedal, and those first, like, how many pedals, like, you're pushing, you're standing up on the thing, you're like trying to get that thing in motion. And that's essentially what Mercury's doing right now, is it's a harder push, it's a harder pedal. But once we get past that shadow phase, mid-month, that bike is going to be, running smoothly. So just keep in mind, like Shawna said earlier, she didn't name it, out the gate, or like take off to, we're back on track, but, that the train is going to chug forward slowly. So yeah. Let's talk about some tarot cards associated with this, Mercury stationing. And I found them interesting. I got the Three of Cups as the focus and the Three of Pentacles as the grounding. And these two cards right away didn't scream, Mercury stationing direct to me. But really I realized that it's the combination of the two is, being able to focus on your own joy and harmony, because this is essentially what we've been working on this whole Leo season. And this is kind of one of those last moments of that activating that Leo energy, and especially at the eclipse point, to remind us, hey, we've been working on what it is that brings us joy and emotional, fulfillment, for ourselves, and, and just harmony in our lives, especially with all that, Jupiter energy and Libra that we've been working through, too. So, I think this is the time to, really focus on, what brings us joy and how we can connect with others, to help get the work done, what we're focusing on and what we're dedicating ourselves to, especially going into this Virgo energy, cause we're ready to work. But how are we working from a place of joy? Are we, doing what it is that we love? Are we connecting with the people, that, lift us up and help us, celebrate who we are in that Leo function? So these are the kind of questions I'd be asking, myself as we go into that Virgo energy, and we're really gonna focus on our efforts on progress in life, in material type of things. So Shawna, how do you think these two cards, these double threes, play into this, Mercury transit?
Yeah. So the fact that they're both threes is what really struck me. Because threes are typically associated with creativity, and that totally goes along with what you're talking about, Mel. And it reminds me of kind of like putting an end cap or tying a bow on the Leo energy. Because the threes are like, okay, don't forget creativity, self-expression, emotional connection to oneself is really important. The other piece of this is that both of these tarot cards are somehow about working together with others. And so to me, there's kind of like a blend. There's this blend of creativity and emotional connection, but then also how is that brought out into the world so that we can work together and play well with others, so to speak. So to me, there's a lot of encouragement to be mindful of that and to take this creative and emotional sensitivity out into the world and to connect with others in a skillful way, which I think the transition of Leo to Virgo is very much about.
Yes. Cause we still have, like we still have, Venus, cruising through Leo too. So we're kind of getting, a dose of both of these realities here, that Leo and Virgo energy together. And I kind of, Three of Cups and the Three of Pentacles is kind of Leo and, and Virgo, together in a sense.
Yeah,
so
it is.
It is. And, so for any of you that have been feeling a little on the low side or, just haven't been feeling so great and things have got you down, like I feel like these are the type of cards that are going to, bring that healing, bring that recovery, to you, so that you feel your joy more and are more aware of, just the things that are good in life, and how we can work and stay focused and determined to have joy in our life. Because, to be honest, it takes work to be happy.
Yeah,
it does. Because I think for most people out there, unless you're just this bouncy, soul, we go through periods, and it's kind of can be easy to get down on certain things or to overlook what is good in life. So I think these cards help remind us to stay focused on what brings us joy, to stay dedicated to our own harmony and our own, emotional connection with others. And really, once again, celebrating, who we are, and who others are and how we can work together within that framework. Because, like you said, Virgo, it's time to get some work done here. And so now we're all going to be focused, and our mind is going to be ready to go on that. And so I'm hoping that everybody is focused on something that brings them joy is basically what I'm saying here. Focus on your joy, people. So yes. So, anyway, so how about some questions for this Mercury stationing direct? I would ask myself, I would say, what have I learned about my own joy during the last month? Based on that knowledge, what is my next step forward? I would ask, with this new awareness, where is my focus being led? How can I discipline myself to get back on track? And then lastly, and simple enough, I would just ask, how can I celebrate how far I've come? Because we've all done a lot of work here, and this is one of those transits that is really, moving us forward now. So let's celebrate, ourselves, for all the hard work that we put into, growing as a person, especially this year in general. So, keep that in mind. So.
I love those.
But
nice.
Yes. So, yeah, Shawna, let's kick into our last aspect and kind of big one at that. And that is that full moon in Pisces, which we are titling Spiritual Connection in a Material World. And that's going to happen exactly on Wednesday, September 6th at 12:03 a.m. Pacific time, which is 7:03 a.m. Universal time and 5:03 p.m. Aussie Eastern time. And that full moon is going to be at 13 degrees Pisces. All right, Shawna, Pisces is back. So kick us in with your quote for this full moon.
So this quote is by Julia Cameron, the writer, playwright, filmmaker, and the author of one of my favorite books of all time, The Artist's Way. And so she says, "In times of pain, when the future is too terrifying to contemplate, and the past is too painful to remember. I have learned to pay attention to right now. The precise moment I was in was always the only safe point for me. And I really like this, this quote for this entire week, but especially the full moon in Pisces, because, the full moon is illuminating and bringing up a lot of the issues that we talked about just now earlier in the episode with the sun opposing Neptune. Full moon in Pisces can bring up a sense of confusion or things, that are unseen, feeling very strong, which is basically your intuitions coming up, but maybe you don't always know or have a reason to explain your intuition. And so, for me, and what I like about the entire Artist's Way is she really emphasizes, that it doesn't do us much good to go too far into the future or too far into the past. All that we can do is pay attention to right now, this exact precise moment. And I think that concept also speaks to the polarity of Virgo and Pisces, which is the full moon. The sun is in Virgo, the moon is in Pisces, this polarity of being like, okay, what can I do right now? How can I be with myself in a way that, that is allowing and intelligent and isn't jumping too far forward or too far back. And that process can actually bring a lot of peace when we do that.
Yeah, that's so true, Shawna, because we were just talking about this earlier in the episode, like, that, you know, getting the mind stuck in the past, or thinking towards the future and kind of not being in this moment here and now, which is essentially the only thing that we have, right? Mm-hmm. So I love that quote. And it's a great quote, to remember when those emotions are kicked up, you know, cause here we have a full moon in Pisces, a water sign, where, you know, moons like water signs. Well, not all water signs. It's not too crazy about Scorpio, but for its own reasons. But what it does is it removes, any type of like a boundary. And that's what Neptune in Pisces is essentially. Like there's no fine form around it like that Virgo energy. And when you put a moon and your emotional awareness and those kind of subconscious impulses and those behavioral aspects, into this watery land, you know, there's no boundary there. And so it can get taken to an extreme, in a sense. And that's why we see shadow sides of Pisces, like, you know, self-pity and feeling sorry for yourself about something, or, not quite seeing things clearly and kind of living in an emotional illusion in a sense, or, feeling the need to escape from something. And so a lot of these things can come up during this time, of the full moon in Pisces, to where, the sun is basically challenging us on these behavioral aspects of ourselves in certain situations in our life, you know, depending on where it is in your birth chart. You know, if you have it it depends on what houses you have it in, that it's activating that kind of like where you're looking at things clearly, or where you need to look at things a little bit more clearly and kind of dispel, that confusion. Because like Shawna was saying, we're working through a lot of confusion this week, and trying to get clear in our lives. And I think that this full moon is going to help us do so in whatever area that it's touching in our chart. Because essentially we are talking about 13 degrees Pisces. In Wateki's system, 13, a 4, a 13, or a 22 is really symbolizing breakdown and breakthrough. So, this is a full moon where we are probably going to have a breakdown of some sort. And I don't want you to be scared of that, you know, because, you know, how much do we like break through? Like, in order to break through, you gotta break down. And so I think we're going to probably have a little bit of a breakdown around some of these, Pisces and Neptunian issues. So yeah, Shawna, how do you see that, how do you kind of see that falling into place here? Breaking down, breaking through.
Yeah, breaking down, breaking through. Yeah. So, I agree. I think that, the quote unquote process of breakdown, it like, it needs to happen as a part of the cycle of knowing ourselves, like we were talking about just a moment ago. And it's interesting to me that this full moon is placed like earlier in the week, kind of like we were talking about, where earlier in the week there may be more of a sense of confusion, or even like this full moon kind of adds to the mix where it's like there's a heightened emotional intensity. I find that in the days leading up to the full moon, there is a sense of urgency sometimes where people feel like they need to like express, or they need to get something figured out, or whatever it is that's on their mind or on their hearts. It feels very, it feels urgent, and it almost feels like overwhelming to contain. And that's why we see the correlation between a spike in things like crime or police reports, or even in mental institutions, there's more incidents. Things like this typically happen in the days leading up to the full moon. And so that's not because people go crazy. That's because there's a sense of urgency with whatever it is that is unconscious that's coming up. And this is even more so with the sign of Pisces, because Pisces is about unconscious material. It's about connecting to the collective. And this full moon is conjunct with Neptune within a degree. And Neptune has those same qualities of Pisces as the collective unconsciousness, and sensing something that is outside of us that we can't really explain why. We can tell that something, you know, our gut, our little intuitive spidey senses tell us about it. And so yeah, I think breakdown prior to the breakthrough is entirely possible earlier in the week. And I think, like you were saying before, Mel, the more that we can not cling to things, but rather like just let things be and let something run its course, the easier that process is. And then I think later in the week, there's going to be like a breath of fresh air where there's kind of like a release or an exhale almost from all of the emotional intensity.
Yeah, that's totally true. And I love how you bring up the point of the full moon and urgency. Because essentially, you know, we are reaching an opposition. It's basically an apex of the polarity of the two signs together. And, with that opposition, you know, you feel the need, for release. And that's why urgency can come on, because it's like, oh, I have to do this. I have to release this. I have to like exercise this energy. I have to, you know, put it out there. And especially in a public forum, you know, like, we're usually the most visible at this full moon. Everybody is, and the world is. So I find that interesting, that sense of urgency, paired with the need to release, and how those two things can be paired together. And, you know, here we are talking about polarity. And each time we have a full moon in any sign or any combo signs, we are essentially pairing those two dualities together that are very different, but very much the same, and kind of complete this whole picture. So I would say, you know, since we're in our yearly, full moon, Pisces full moon, where we are, you know, adjusting to that polarity of Virgo, the sun is asking us once again to, let's shine some awareness on what is real here. Because the moon and the subconscious, you know, just our, you know, behavioral motivations are a little clouded right now with all that Neptunian energy. And so the sun is challenging us to be like, hey, come on, let's come back to reality. Come back. Come on. Get on over here. And so I find that this could be actually a very fruitful time for anybody that's dealing with, any type of, addiction issues or, you know, some escapism issues. And it doesn't have to be with just a substance. I mean, obviously that's the first thing we go to. But if we have certain patterns within ourselves that, we execute to escape from something, like this is going to be brought up and challenged at this time. And the beauty of that is that we can get more awareness around that, and see how that affects our lives on a real level, how that affects our reality when we run away from things and are addicted to certain behaviors. We're going to become much more aware of that, during this full moon. And we might get a dose of reality. That's the thing, is like, the sun is shining from Virgo, and it's like, well, I'm still focused on what's real. And the moment of now, like Shawna's quote, what is right here, right now, not what you think it is or what it will be, or that vision you have for it, or that vision you did have for it. You're being challenged with the sense of what is real right now in this moment. And that can be a very powerful thing if you allow yourself to embrace that. So yeah, Shawna, what do you think about all that?
Yeah. So I'm glad that you brought up the element of escapism, because that's definitely a possibility, something that could come up. More so for people that are predisposed, like you said, Mel, because the shadow of Pisces is escapism, whereas Virgo is like direct. Virgo is like, I want to handle business. Let's talk about it. Let's make a plan. Let's get in there. Pisces is like, I don't really want to talk about this. I'm going to go, I'm going to drink a few beers. I'm going to do some drugs. I'm going to watch, 10 episodes of my favorite TV show. I'm going to go to the beach and not think about work, or I'm going to just emotionally check out while I'm at work and still look like I'm doing the job. I think that a lot of times when we talk about Pisces and escapism or Pisces and addiction, the underlying quality of those things, like those are definitely things that can happen as a shadow side whenever we have a Pisces full moon or anything where there's a heavy Pisces or Neptune influence, which is happening this week. The quality of escapism is it's any activity that is either numbing or it's a tool for avoidance. And so that is, the stereotypical is doing drugs or something like that, but it can also be, defense mechanisms where we push away from whatever is uncomfortable. And I have a sense that even if we do that earlier in the week, because we, let's say we can't handle it and we get overwhelmed by the Pisces energy, I have a sense that we won't be able to do that towards the end of the week when the sun trines with Pluto. Because sometimes, and sometimes we do have to use those techniques of escapism in order to protect ourselves. Like sometimes, whatever it is that's happening is too painful emotionally to process, and it would actually like kill the ego in essence, which we don't want. So then, we do these things to numb. But, so all of this to say that I would watch out just because you don't, drink or you don't do drugs or you don't eat meat or whatever. It does not mean that, we're not, susceptible to escapism, myself included, so I would watch out during the full moon for, just like the quote says, staying present, because anytime that we try to numb or we try to avoid something, it actually causes more pain because we disconnect from the joy that we can have. So staying present, super essential.
Which we don't want to do, Shawna. We just talked about like the Three of Cups and the Three of Pentacles and how we have to focus on the joy. We don't want to, to leave that. So yeah, so keep that in mind here. And let's talk about some specs. We have, Mars is at 0 degrees Virgo, just moved in, is feeling it all out. Whenever, a planet moves into another sign, there's kind of this, gray area for the first the first degree or so as we're getting settled into this. So our Mars energy is kind of offline right now, a little bit and a little funky. So keep that in mind with how you're feeling and your actions and what you might want to do anything, to be honest. Like, because Pisces can be a little bit retreating, can be retreating or needing some time or downtime or rest, or just get some more sleep or, so just know that because that Mars energy is switching and that moon energy, like, chances are you're probably going to be feeling it more on the Tuesday than Wednesday itself, because it's going to apex super, super early in the morning, especially here in the United States. So it'll be that Tuesday night that you're feeling it more. But just a reminder, we still have, Venus, who is in conjunct this moon from Leo. And so, we're feeling a little unsettled and having to make adjustments once again in our love lives or in our relationships or around our own self-worth and what we value and, just, that receptive function of ourselves, is going to be on a slightly uncomfortable spotlight with this full moon. And we still have Mercury trining Uranus, bringing us kind of, the unexpected as far as, messages from other people or our own mind and what we're thinking about. Like, things are gonna essentially, there's the element of something coming out of the blue here. Which, that being said, let's segue into the tarot cards because I think that is kind of is pointing a little finger in that direction. And I don't want anybody to be alarmed, but I got the Tower as the focus and the Nine of Pentacles as the grounding. And to me that really means that we're here to rebuild our own stability, especially in this earthly realm. And that certain illusions, we're talking about Pisces here, and around our own foundation essentially, need to break down, so that we can, rebuild our material life and our own ability to be independent and self-reliant, in certain areas, especially since we're talking about, that Uranus Aries energy talking to that Leo Mercury, there's still that kind of air of the individual, and the Nine of Pentacles is really taps into, someone who can hold their own on a material realm. And we need a strong foundation to do that. So we're getting shaken up here a bit. So, Shawna, what do you think about these two cards together?
Yeah. So the Tower is an interesting card. The Tower to me says change is happening. And like I think you said earlier, Mel, change doesn't have to mean that whatever it is in our lives completely falls away and then something entirely new comes in. It might be a different way of doing things, but regardless of what that looks, so that might be like, it doesn't mean that, if you're looking for a new job or you're unsatisfied with your job, that you need to get a new job or start a new career. It might be doing something differently within that same position. But that being said, to me, the Tower says change is unavoidable. And typically when this card comes up, if a person is trying to avoid a change, they're trying to keep everything exactly how it is and they don't want to change. They want to, make it work exactly as it is. That's typically not an option. And so, so I think that may evoke, a sense of fear in someone who is afraid of change, but I hope that it's an encouragement, and a guidance to allow for change, because when we do with the tarot card, when we allow for change, it can actually happen more organically and even more in a more pleasant way, which is supported and encouraged by the next card, which is the Nine of Pentacles, and that is like a super lovely card. It's all about luxury and things being nice and having having a sense of emotional and financial security and just having beauty surrounding you. So it's kind of to me, this is oh, there's change, but it's okay. You're going to be cool. You're going to be taken care of, and things will actually be better once that change is implemented.
I love that, Shawna, because really, because you were tapping into the whole Neptunian functions that we were just talking about, avoiding change or being fearful of it and not, and these are Pisces things. This is what comes up. You want to avoid something. You are fearful of the unknown, and it's I'll just stay here until the Tower comes along. And essentially that's what is coming along here. But I love it because when you are able to break that down, break down these old structures to change, and to get a more innovative and, renovate your life in a way to have a more solid foundation. essentially we're setting ourselves on this course for more self-reliance, for more abundance, for more stability and being able to culminate the things that what it is that we're working for in our lives. So without this reworking of that foundation and that, and whatever that comes, either from within us or from outside of us. And I'm going to say it's probably from outside of us because we're dealing with a full moon in opposition. And usually another person is involved with that. Not always. There could be shadow work, where we're, testing the, that kind of dark area of ourselves. It can be one of the two things. But I think that we are being challenged here. And there has to be some sort of collapse in a sense in order for that pressure to be released. Like when it's all said and done, I think that we're going to feel so much better, especially once we get to that grounded weekend that we're talking about. Because you can't avoid certain things and certain emotional things anymore. We have to get past that hump to build that stability that we're really looking for. And, when we have these full moons, with a Neptune, that, transpersonal planet there, it kind of creates like this, this bigger level of like not just within us personally, but, everything around us in the world. And, like this, we all can connect on these levels right now. And we see it in the world, this breaking down of structure, it's very apparent right now that, essentially fate is at work. We have control within that, we have, free will, but also fateful things happen, so that we can access that power and that ego, that we have within us to take action and rebuild that foundation. I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. It reminds me of just trusting the process. And like you were saying earlier, Mel, the more that we can let go, the more there's an opening for something new. Right?
Because we have that Pluto trine, Sun trine Pluto coming along the way. And I think that is really going to provide that subtle strength that we need, where we're just going to feel it flowing. So, I don't want anybody to be scared about any tower action, but, sometimes we have to fall in order for us to come back, 20 times stronger. So just look at at this as one of those moments where we're going to, rebuild this rocky foundation and we're going to get ourselves back on track, to what it is that we're going for, and dispel any illusion around that and get in the moment of now, the quote had suggested. So that being said, just a couple questions to take away for this full moon in Pisces. I would ask myself, does my spiritual inclinations reflect what I see in my material world? I would ask, do I recognize what old emotional structures have been built on illusion? How can I rebuild upon a stronger foundation? And then lastly, I would ask, what intuitive feelings are shining through? How can I focus my awareness to achieve a breakthrough?
Nice.
So, let's break through, right, Shawna? Let's get through this, these are important moments, that are really setting up the months to come, with that energy there. So, what have we learned?
So much.
So much. Well, we've learned that the Sun in Virgo opposing Neptune in Pisces and then trining Pluto is really another cycle of knowing ourselves and getting in touch with that and the honesty that lies there and the illusion and how we can get real around that. We got Mercury stationing direct and moving to Virgo, and now we feel back on track and we're ready to go. And then we have that full moon in Pisces, that is really triggering our spiritual connection within this material world. So yeah, Shawna, I know you have some awesome action item for everyone to take away this week with this energy going on. Please share.
I do. So this action item for this week is a journaling activity. I want you to take a piece of paper and to draw, a line down the center so that there's two columns. One column will list what is breaking down in our lives in this moment. And so this, ideally, it's like a variety of different things. It's what are the structures of life that are breaking down, whether that is like living situation or family relationships or friendships or like hobbies, like anything that feels like it's kind of crumbling literally, but then also belief systems, personality traits. What is breaking down? What is kind of like being changed, being called into question? So that's one column. And then the other column is I want us to do some reflection on if those things do fall away, like how do you feel about it? What's left? Like basically the worst case scenario, if those things do fall away, like, are you going to be okay? And, you know, how will you be okay? What is it that you have left? And this is more open-ended, of course. The one thing that I do know is I know that you'll be okay. Like, I know that we'll all be okay. And so, I really like this because it helps us to flesh out what exactly is, being called to break down, what exactly is being called to transform. And then it's just a reminder to know that, like, yeah, it's okay. That we will always be okay and we're always supported. And, sometimes we have support that we didn't even realize that we have, that it'll be something that we think of. So that is action item for this week. And then of course, another way to get involved is to connect with us on Instagram, or to become a patron of the podcast to show your appreciation. And you can connect with us through the podcast on, feminineprinciplepodcast.podbean.com.
Yes. Yes. We would love to hear from you and what's going on for you this week and like, how all this fits in, because what we're sharing with you, feedback is essential to the whole cycle, the cycle of us knowing ourselves and what it is that we share with you. So please reach out. We'd love to hear from you, and connect. So that being said, where can you find us? Well, you can find me at energeticprinciples.com. And you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Energetic Principles, and also on YouTube, as Energetic Principles, which I will have at the time of this going live. I will have, September's horoscopes up where I do, address this full moon that we've been talking about. So if you want to find out more, come to my YouTube channel and take a look at your, sun and your rising sign, to get a little more insight. So Shawna, where can they find you?
You can find me at neofeminine.com. You can also find me on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube under Neo Feminine Astrology.
Yes. And we are both here every day sharing little tidbits about, you know, our lives and in the astro and, you know, the tarot and the quotes and all these things that you, find on the podcast. We carry on through the week. So please come visit us, and share your love. So yeah, any last words, Shawna?
Yeah, just sending lots of love and reminding everyone that if you do enjoy this podcast, definitely give us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. That helps us out a lot to reach more people. And then also make sure that you're subscribed so that you can get future episodes every moment that it is released.
Yes. And they come out, just as a friendly reminder, midnight Pacific time on Sundays. So keep a lookout. We're so excited to see what this week brings. And, I wish everybody the best, along their own personal journey. So thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, may the stars be with you.
Namaste.